I was 70 years old living in a quiet American suburb where every lawn looked trimmed, every mailbox freshly painted, and every neighbor pretended they minded their own business, even though they watched everything from behind their curtains. My husband Harold had retired 5 years ago and spent most of his mornings reading newspapers and pretending he enjoyed silence, while I knew very well he missed the chaos of his old construction job. Our house had an extra basement studio, and for years we never rented it out because Harold believed strangers brought trouble, but after 2 surgeries and rising medical bills, we both agreed we needed a little help with expenses. So when a young woman named Tessa walked in with her bright smile, big city attitude, and overly sweet voice, I felt something twist in my chest, a quiet warning. But we needed the rent, and she needed a place, so I signed the agreement and handed her the keys. She claimed she was 23, working at a local cafe, saving money for college, and honestly, she looked harmless, with her messy ponytail, oversized jacket, and eyes that sparkled every time she talked about her future. But the very first night, I heard her door slam at 2 in the morning and loud music shaking the vents of my home. Harold did not hear anything because he slept like the dead, but I lay awake listening to every thump and laugh and the sound of unfamiliar male voices. I sat up in bed and felt that same twist in my chest again. Something was not right. The next morning, I walked past her door and saw muddy shoe prints on the stairs leading from the driveway down to the basement. I saw pizza boxes tossed on the ground. I saw cigarette butts, even though my house rules clearly said no smoking on property. Harold noticed me staring and asked if everything was all right, and I simply nodded, because I knew if I told him he would storm down there and start a fight. I have lived long enough to know silence is more powerful than shouting. Let people reveal what they truly are. They always do. That evening I baked a banana bread and knocked gently on her door. Tessa opened it wearing shorts too small and a tank top that made her look more like a party girl than a student. The smell of smoke rolled out with her. I smiled, warm and polite, and told her I brought something for her. She took the plate, smiled with teeth too practiced, and said, "Thanks, Grandma." "Grandma." She said it with a sweet tone, but her eyes had a challenge in them. I knew that tone. I had seen girls like her decades ago, girls who thought older women were invisible, weak, irrelevant. I did not correct her. I simply thanked her and left, because the best way to handle disrespect is to show that you are not moved by it. That night the music was louder. Voices were louder. I heard bottles clinking against the floor. At one point I heard a crash. Harold woke up asking what was happening, and I told him it was just her settling in. He believed me and went back to sleep. But I stayed awake listening, because the more noise she made, the quieter I became inside. Quiet means I am watching. Quiet means I am waiting. 2 days later, when I went out to check the mail, I noticed a car I had never seen before parked half on my property. A sleek black car with tinted windows and plates from another state. Something about it felt wrong. Young men sat inside smoking and laughing. They looked at me like I was background decoration. I nodded politely and walked away, but inside a storm was forming. Because now it was clear the girl had broken not one, not two, but all my rules. And she believed I would not do anything because I was 70. Later that afternoon, I knocked again on her door and told her gently that I needed to review a few house rules with her. She rolled her eyes, called me adorable, and said she would handle everything. Handle everything. That meant she had no intention of stopping. So I changed my strategy. I started watching. Not interfering. Not warning. Just watching. At night, I stood behind the living room curtain, seeing the shadows of people entering her studio. During the day, I checked the security cameras Harold had installed years ago. Every day, she grew bolder. Every day, she tested more limits. Every day, she believed I was powerless. But she never noticed that I was observing every guest, every bag, every car, every movement. Because arrogance makes young people blind. And patience makes old women dangerous. A week later, the true trouble finally revealed itself. I was watering the garden when I saw Tessa step out of her studio whispering to a man in a hoodie. He handed her something small. She slipped it into her jacket. I froze. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. I had worked as a nurse for 40 years. I knew exactly what those small packets were. And they were not sugar. I realized then that she was not just breaking rules. She was bringing danger into my house. Into my home. Into the place I had built with my aging hands and tired heart. And she thought I was too old to notice. I walked back into the house calm, steady, and sharper than I had been in years. Because the moment she crossed that line, the game changed. Now I was not just a landlady. I was a woman protecting her home. And I was done staying silent. The moment I shut the kitchen door behind me, I felt my heartbeat steady itself the way it used to before difficult nights in the emergency ward when I had to stay sharp and calm because panic never saves anyone. Harold was sitting at the dining table sorting his pills and humming an old country song, unaware of the storm growing under our roof. I kissed his shoulder, told him to rest, and walked to the living room where our old wooden file cabinet sat quietly in the corner. Inside it, I kept every rental document, every rule, every signed page, and every small detail that most people forget to check, but I never do. I pulled out Tessa's file and placed it on the table. If she wanted to play smart, I would show her what real experience looked like. That evening, I made myself tea and sat by the window pretending to read while my eyes kept drifting to the driveway where the same black car parked again. This time, 2 men got out and headed straight toward the basement. They did not care if anyone saw them. They believed no one would stop them. In this neighborhood, most elderly couples minded their own business, but I was not most elderly women. I was raised on strict survival. I had lived through the rough side of life before my comfortable suburb years, and I always believed that age sharpens instincts instead of dulling them. Around midnight, the noises started again, louder than before. It was not laughter this time. It was arguing. Furniture being pushed. A girl's voice swearing. A man demanding something. My hand tightened around my teacup. I walked quietly to the vent and listened closer. I could not hear every word, but the tone was dangerous. Too dangerous for my home. I knew I had to act, but not impulsively. I could not confront her without proof. I could not accuse her without strategy. Experience taught me that when dealing with people who gamble with trouble, you must never show fear. You must show patience. And patience is something a 70-year-old woman has mastered. The next morning, Tessa walked past me on the stairs, rushing out with messy hair and dark circles under her eyes. She looked at me briefly, then smirked as if my presence was a joke. She said, "Morning, Grandma," in a voice dripping with disrespect. I smiled, the same polite smile that scares people who know they have pushed too far. She vanished out the door thinking she won something. She did not realize she had already lost. I spent that day cleaning the porch, watering the plants, and greeting neighbors like it was any ordinary morning, but my eyes kept drifting to the basement door. Every time the breeze shifted, I caught the faint smell of smoke drifting upward. When Harold went to take his afternoon nap, I slipped downstairs and quietly placed my ear against her door. Silence. The kind that hides secrets, not peace. I walked back up and opened the security camera recordings on my tablet. I rewound the footage from the past 4 days. Men coming and going. Small packages exchanged. Money passing hands. Cars parked illegally. People staying for minutes then leaving. This was not student life. This was business. Risky business. And she was running it from my home, thinking I was too old to see it. At dinner, Harold mentioned inviting Tessa upstairs for a meal because he thought she might be lonely. I nodded gently and told him maybe later because she had a busy schedule. He did not need to know the truth, not yet. I would not let stress hurt his heart. Some battles are for the women who know silence better than men know confrontation. That night the noise returned. This time mixed with another sound, a heavy thud, then a cry, then whispers of panic. My body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped outside into the dark and stood at the top of the basement stairs. I heard her voice pleading low and desperate. I heard footsteps pacing. I heard fear. Not mine. Hers. The door opened slightly and a man peeked out. He froze when he saw me standing there in my nightrobe holding a flashlight like a security guard. He looked shocked, as if he had forgotten I lived here. He muttered something and closed the door, quickly leaving me outside with more questions than answers. I walked back inside slowly, my steps measured, my breath calm. Fear is for people who do not know themselves. At 70, I knew exactly who I was and exactly how dangerous quiet strength can be. The next morning I acted. Not with shouting. Not with confrontation. But with preparation. I made copies of all footage. Printed images of the men. Printed screenshots of timestamps. Placed everything neatly inside a folder. Then I sat at my dining table sipping tea, waiting for Tessa to come home. Around noon she staggered up the driveway looking exhausted, frustrated, and careless. She did not see me sitting on the porch. She walked past me without a greeting. But she stopped when I softly called her name. Her shoulders stiffened. She turned around with a lazy smile. "Yes, Grandma." I stood up slowly, looked straight into her eyes, and spoke in a calm, level voice that even frightened younger nurses back in the day. "We need to talk. Downstairs. Now." Her smirk faded. She followed me reluctantly. With each step her confidence cracked. Because something in my voice told her this was not going to be another soft warning she could ignore. We reached the basement. She crossed her arms and waited. I placed the folder on her table, opened it, and watched her face drain of color. Her eyes jumped from one picture to the next, one camera angle to another. Every visitor, every exchange, every rule broken, documented carefully by the old woman she thought was harmless. She looked up at me, her lips trembling. But before she could speak, I raised my hand, gently stopping her. "This is my home," I said slowly. "And you brought danger into it. You thought my age made me weak. You were wrong." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time her arrogance vanished, and fear settled in its place. But this confrontation was only the beginning. The real twist, the real revelation, was still to come. And she had no idea what I had discovered behind her closet door the night she left in a hurry. Tessa stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at the photos like they were ghosts from a nightmare she never expected to face. Her breathing grew quicker, her fingers twitched, and her eyes kept darting toward the door like she was calculating how fast she could run away. I did not move. I simply watched her the way I used to watch unstable patients who were seconds away from admitting the truth they had been hiding. I walked slowly toward the closet, the same one I had checked 2 days earlier when she had rushed out, forgetting to lock her door. She had no idea I had even opened it. That day I had found something she thought no one would ever look for. A small metal case hidden behind stacked boxes and a broken lamp. Inside the case, I found several prescription pads, blank but stamped. The kind used in clinics. The kind criminals used to forge medicine orders. The kind that could destroy lives. Now standing in her studio again, I placed the metal case on the table beside the folder of camera images. Her eyes widened with a mix of shock and fear. She whispered slowly, like she was choking on her own breath. "Where did you get that?" I answered calmly, the same way I answered panicked family members in hospitals years ago. "From the place you thought no one would search. Your closet." Her body stiffened and panic finally reached her face. Her voice cracked as she said, "You went through my things." I shook my head. "You brought strangers into my house. You brought illegal business into my home. You broke every rule and every bit of trust." I did what any smart old woman would do. I protected my home. She backed away until her legs hit the edge of her bed. Her confidence was gone. Her bravado melted. And now she looked small. Very small. Like a child caught stealing, but too scared to run. For a long moment she did not speak. Then her voice came out small and trembling. Please, you do not understand. I am in trouble. I got involved with the wrong people. I did not know how to stop. I needed money. I needed a place to hide. She covered her face with both hands and whispered again. I never meant to hurt you. I let her speak. Not because I trusted her, but because guilt reveals more information than questions ever do. She rambled about a man named Kai, a dangerous man who recruited her at the cafe. She said she owed money. She said she had no other option. Her words spilled out fast, like she had been waiting for someone to listen. But the thing is, listening does not mean believing. I sat down slowly on her plastic chair, watching her pace. The whole time she kept her back turned to the metal case. She was terrified of it. I could see it in the way her shoulders shook. When she finally stopped talking, I spoke with a slow, steady voice. You brought danger into my home. You lied to me. You risked my husband's safety. You risked mine. Her lips trembled. I am sorry. I will leave today. Please do not tell anyone. Please. I leaned back and took a deep breath, letting silence settle in the room. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. I wanted her to feel what real accountability looked like. Not the fake apologies she used to escape situations before. I told her leave. But not because you asked. Because you lost the right to stay. You have 2 hours. Pack everything. And be gone. She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face too fast. But I was not finished. Not even close. Before she walked toward her drawers, I said her name sharply. She turned back, fear in her eyes. I continued. And Tessa, if that man or any of those men come back, if they step even 1 foot on my property, I will not be the kind old lady you think I am. I will protect my house. And I will not protect you. She swallowed hard and nodded again. I walked upstairs and shut the door behind me. The moment I stepped into my kitchen, I felt the pressure in my chest loosen. But only for a second. Because through the window I saw a car rolling slowly up the driveway. Not a black one. A different one. Silver. Dusty. And dangerous just from the way it moved. It stopped right in front of my porch. A man stepped out. Tall. Cold eyes. Hood pulled low. And something about him sent a chill through my bones that even my years of hospital night shifts had never given me. He walked toward my door, his steps slow and deliberate, like a man who believed no one would dare challenge him. He stopped at the porch and looked directly at me through the screen door. His voice was low, steady, and chilling. I am looking for Tessa. My heartbeat slowed, not from fear, but from preparation. Because I knew exactly who he was. And I knew this was the real danger. The danger she had brought into my life. I stood still. Calm. Strong. The way only a 70-year-old woman with decades of experience and no fear of trouble can stand. I replied in a steady voice. She is downstairs. But before you go to her, we need to talk. He blinked. Surprised. Annoyed. And then he stepped up 1 more stair. His shadow falling across my doorway. And that was the moment I knew. The real showdown had just begun. The man's shadow stretched across my porch like a warning, but I did not step back, and I did not blink. At 70, I had seen enough real danger to know that fear only feeds people like him. He expected me to tremble or shut the door or pretend I had not heard him, but I just stood there holding the screen door gently with 1 hand, like nothing in the world could shake me. He stared at me with cold, sharp eyes, sizing me up, trying to read if I was weak or foolish. Most people saw my white hair and slow steps and assumed I was harmless. But he was about to learn why underestimating an old woman is the biggest mistake young men make. His voice came out low and flat. Where is Tessa? I kept my tone steady. Before you go downstairs, I need to know who you are and why you are here. He tilted his head slightly like he could not believe someone my age was questioning him instead of obeying. Finally, he answered with a slow, irritated growl. I am Kai. That name made sense. The name Tessa whispered earlier with fear woven between each word. He stepped one foot inside the porch like he owned the ground he walked on, but I gently pushed the screen door closed with a firm hand. You stay out here until you answer me properly. His jaw tightened. He was used to threats, not boundaries. He was used to loud confrontations, not calm silence. Silence unsettled people like him because it made them unsure. And unsure men make mistakes. He said Tessa owes me money. I came to collect. Move aside. I shook my head. If you want to collect from her, that is between you and her, but you will not bring trouble into my home. He raised his eyebrow. Your home. I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, my home. And nobody enters it unless I allow them. For a moment he simply stared at me confused. People half his age probably moved when he stepped forward. People younger than me probably avoided his eyes. But I did not. And that made him uncomfortable. Finally he smirked. A slow mocking smirk. He said, you really think you can stop me? I took a slow breath and replied with a voice calm enough to scare a guilty soul. I have lived longer than you. I have seen more danger than you. And trust me, son, you do not want to find out what I am capable of when it comes to protecting my house. That smirk faded. He stepped back a little. Not much, but enough. Then he looked toward the basement door and took a step. I raised my voice firmly. Stop. He halted. Annoyed. Confused. But he stopped. I said Tessa is packing. She will be leaving my property today. If you want to talk to her, you will talk outside. Not in my basement. Not in my house. Not in my driveway without my permission. He stared at me again, trying to intimidate me with silence. But I matched his stare with a steady gaze that told him I had nothing to lose and no fear of him. People like him survive on fear. Without fear, they lose half their power. After a long tense moment, he shrugged and stepped back. Fine. Let her come out. But she leaves with me. My stomach tightened. That was not going to happen. No girl deserved to walk into danger even if she had made terrible choices. I knew I could not protect her forever, but I was not about to hand her over to a man who looked like he broke people for a living. I told him she will not be leaving with anyone until she is off my property safely. He narrowed his eyes. You think you can decide that? I nodded. As long as she is on my land. Yes, I can. Before he could argue, the basement door suddenly swung open. Tessa stood there, pale, shaking, and terrified. Her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her eyes darting between me and Kai. And then she whispered his name like a child whispering the name of a nightmare. Kai, please. Kai turned his head toward her. Come on. We are fixing this now. But Tessa shook her head violently. No. Not like this. Not here. Not with her. She looked at me, and I saw something new in her eyes. Respect. Not much, but enough to soften her voice when she said, Ma'am, please let me explain. Please do not let him take me. Kai stepped forward, but I blocked his path again. Not by force. Just by presence. And strangely, he stopped again. Tessa rushed up to me. Her hands trembling. Ma'am, he will hurt me. I cannot go with him. Please, I will do anything. Please. Kai spoke sharply. You owe me. You do not get to run. I raised my hand again and both of them fell silent. Decades of being a nurse taught me how to shut down chaos with just a tone. I looked at Tessa, then at Kai, then back at Tessa. Tell me everything. Right now. Before he takes one more step. Tessa swallowed hard and her voice cracked. I did not owe him money. I refused to move his product. He wanted me to hold something for him. When I refused, he threatened me. That is why I came here. I thought I could hide. I thought he would not find me. My chest tightened. Not out of fear. Out of anger. Because now I knew exactly what kind of man stood on my porch. And what kind of danger had stepped into my life because of the girl who broke my rules. Kai took a slow step forward. I said enough of this. And with one sharp motion, I pointed toward the street. Both of you. Outside. Now. Tessa looked relieved. Kai looked irritated. But neither of them argued. They followed me toward the driveway. The cold wind sweeping through the yard. The tension growing heavier with every step. But just as we reached the mailbox, a second car rolled up. A dark van. Slow. Heavy. Silent. And when it stopped, the doors opened. 3 more men stepped out. Tessa's face turned ghost white. Kai stiffened slightly. And I, a 70-year-old suburban woman, stood between all of them. The real twist had just arrived. And now the danger was no longer hidden in her basement. It was standing in my driveway, facing me directly. The moment those 3 men stepped out of the van, the entire driveway changed. The cold air grew heavier, the silence sharper, even the birds in the trees seemed to stop moving. Tessa gasped and grabbed my arm, her fingers cold and trembling. Kai stiffened, his jaw clenching like he had not expected backup to arrive without him calling. That told me everything. Whoever these men were, they were not answering to him. They were answering to someone higher. The tallest one stepped forward, his boots thudding on the pavement like he wanted each step to announce his power. He had a shaved head, a scar across his neck, and eyes that scanned the house, the yard, the mailbox, and finally me. Slowly, calmly, deliberately. Then he turned toward Kai. We gave you time. His voice was deep and emotionless. Cold enough to make Tessa stumble back. Kai swallowed and answered quickly. I was handling it. The tall man shook his head. Does not look like it. We do not trust mistakes. The second man leaned against the van, folding his arms as if he had done this 100 times. The third one walked toward the basement entrance, scanning the windows, checking corners like he was searching for something. Or someone. My heartbeat slowed even more. Not from fear. From calculation. I needed to keep control of the situation, or this driveway was going to turn into the place where someone lost more than money. Tessa whispered softly. What do they want? I squeezed her hand gently, reminding her to breathe. Then I stepped forward. Not quickly. Not nervously. Just a calm, steady step of a 70-year-old woman who had no time for foolishness. The tall man turned his head toward me, surprised that I dared to close the distance. His eyes narrowed. Who are you? I answered in a steady voice. This is my property. And you are standing on it without permission. Leave. Behind me, Tessa inhaled sharply. Kai stared at me like I had lost my mind. But that tall man, he just laughed. A slow, deep laugh that sent a chill through the air. Then he took one more step forward. Lady, do you know who we are? I kept my eyes on his without blinking. Do you know who I am? That confused him. He tilted his head slightly. And for the first time, he looked unsure. Not afraid, but unsure. Because old women do not usually talk like that. Old women do not usually stand between dangerous men. Old women do not stare without blinking. He said you are in the middle of something that has nothing to do with you. I shook my head. Anything that steps on my land becomes my business. He exhaled slowly, annoyed. We came for the girl. She is something that belongs to us. Tessa shook her head frantically. I do not have anything. I gave everything back. I swear. I swear I did. The second man spoke from behind. She still has the papers. We need those. My mind clicked. The forged prescription pads. The blank sheets stamped with clinic logos. The metal case hidden in her closet. Those papers. Those were what these men wanted. Those were why they had chased her. Those were why they had followed her here. Into my home. The tall man stepped forward again. "Give us the papers. Or give us the girl. And we leave." Tessa gasped. I stepped half a step in front of her, and his eyes moved from her fear to my calm face. And he realized I was not going to hand over anything or anyone. He said slowly, "Are you sure you want to make this choice? You are old. You should be resting inside, not standing in driveways trying to be a hero." I smiled gently, not mocking, not nervous, just honest. When you reach my age, you learn two things: what matters and what does not. This home matters. Peace matters. Safety matters. And you threatening a young girl on my driveway does not. He stared at me, long, intensely, trying to decode the calmness I carried. But calmness is something you earn after surviving decades, not something men like him understand. Finally, he spoke in a sharper, colder voice. "Move aside, lady. This is your last chance." Before I could answer, Harold stepped out of the front door. My heart jumped. He was supposed to be asleep. He stood on the porch blinking in confusion, his soft slippers barely making a sound on the wooden boards. He looked at the group of men, then at me, then at Tessa, and asked gently, "Honey, what is going on out here?" The tall man smirked. "This your husband?" My chest tightened. I needed Harold safe, far away from this. I turned and said calmly, "Go inside, love. I am handling this." But Harold was always stubborn. He walked down 2 steps and stood beside me, not threatening, just present. A quiet reminder that I was not alone. Kai muttered under his breath, "This is turning into a mess." The tall man raised his hand, shutting him up. Then he looked straight at me, eyes cold, voice flat. "I will say this once. Give us what we came for, or this driveway becomes a problem for everyone." Tessa grabbed my arm again, whispering, trembling, "Ma'am, please. I cannot go with them. They will not let me leave. Please do not hand me over." I squeezed her hand, and in that moment something sharpened inside me. Protective, determined, unshakable. I faced the tall man again, my voice low, calm, steady. "You want the papers? Come back with a warrant. This is America. This is my property. And the only thing you are going to do today is leave." For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. Then his expression darkened. He took 1 step toward me, one threatening step that made Tessa gasp and Harold tense. But before he could take another, a loud siren blared down the street. The kind that cut through the air like lightning. The kind every criminal recognizes instantly. The tall man snapped his head toward the corner. Police car. Coming fast. Lights flashing. The men exchanged looks. Sharp. Panicked. Annoyed. They had seconds, not minutes. Kai cursed under his breath. The second man slid back into the van. The third one jogged quickly toward the passenger seat. The tall man pointed at me. A silent promise. A threat. A warning. Then he turned, got into the van, and it sped away. Kai hesitated for one last second, staring at Tessa. But when he saw the police lights getting closer, he ran to his car and disappeared. The siren grew louder, closer, flashing red and blue across my yard. And Tessa collapsed onto the ground, shaking and crying. Not because of fear, because for the first time she realized she was safe. But she did not know the real twist was still waiting. Because the police car pulling in was not just any officer. It was someone who recognized Tessa, and someone who knew exactly what she had been running from. The night settled over the house with a strange calm, as if the walls themselves were waiting for the final truth to rise. I walked through the hallway feeling every step in my bones, but also feeling a strength that 70 years of life had carved into me, the tension of the last Weeks, the lies, the sneaking, the disrespect, all of it was ready to end tonight. I reached the living room where Lily had been pacing like a nervous shadow. She stopped when she saw me, and for the first time she looked younger than ever, not in a sweet way, but like someone who finally realized her game was slipping through her hands. "Mrs. Thompson, I know what you think, but you don't understand," she started saying, words tumbling out in panic. I wanted to believe she was sorry. I wanted to believe she had finally grown up, but her eyes still had that sharp glint, the one that tries to twist truth into something convenient. "Sit down," I told her, my voice steady, calm, unshaken. She hesitated, but she sat, the cushion sinking under her as if her lies had weight. I walked to the side table and picked up the envelope. Inside were the final documents, the proof, the messages, the signed statements from neighbors, everything that tied her to the broken rules, the late visitors, the hidden recording she tried to take of us, the attempts to lure my husband into her drama, even though he had rejected her every time. I placed the envelope in front of her. She stared at it as if it were a bomb, and in a way it was, because every secret she had locked away was inside it, and there was no escape now. "You thought age made me slow," I said. "You thought I would ignore the small things. You thought I would crumble under your confidence. But experience is sharper than youth, and I saw everything." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to cry, but I raised my hand, and she stopped. I was done listening to excuses. "You broke every house rule. I offered you safety, I offered you comfort, I treated you like family, but you treated my home like a playground and me like a fool, and now the result is simple. You leave tomorrow morning. No arguments, no manipulation, no fake tears." Her shoulders collapsed like someone had finally removed a mask she could no longer hold. She looked at me, not with anger this time, but with a strange mix of defeat and clarity. "I never thought you would actually fight back," she whispered. "You looked so gentle, so quiet." "Gentle does not mean weak," I replied. "Quiet does not mean blind. Strength does not fade with age, it grows." She lowered her head for the first time, showing real shame, not performance, not drama, real shame, and in that moment I felt no hatred, only the final release of everything she had tried to drag me into. The next morning the house felt lighter. She packed silently, avoiding eye contact. She left the key on the kitchen counter and walked out without a word. The door closed behind her like the end of a long storm. I stood in my living room, the sun touching the furniture, the windows glowing, the silence peaceful, not tense. I breathed in slowly, feeling the weight lift off my chest. My husband came beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulder. "You handled this better than anyone half your age," he said, pride warm in his voice. I smiled, because age is not something to hide, it is something you earn every year. Writes strength into your bones, every memory sharpens your mind, and every mistake teaches you to stand taller. We sat together, watching the morning settle over the house, a house that finally felt like mine again, safe, steady, grounded. I did not need loud fights or shouting matches. I did not need to throw her out in chaos. I did not need to prove anything to anyone. All I needed was patience, wisdom, and the courage that comes from a lifetime of knowing who I am. And that was the moment I realized something powerful. Youth may run fast, but experience always knows where to go.